Thank you.
So our next subject, Mark, is...
Okay, so we're going to go right to fracking, which is...
Wait a minute, Mark. What's fracking? Is
Well, what it is actually
that a
hydraulic...
college party?
It's actually hydraulic fracturing, okay? And what's done in this case is, you know, high-pressure water along with chemicals or sand are injected into, for example, shale or a geologic formation in order to loosen up or leach out oil or natural gas or some kind of petroleum product, and then that's pumped up to the surface and that's used for fuel.
Well, what I understand is that these are normal well boreholes that go down, but what they're actually doing is they're trying to separate crevices in the shale, correct?
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
but when they do that, doesn't that cause earthquakes, Mark?
There hasn't really been any evidence. That's a claim that this thing caused earthquakes. There hasn't really been any evidence of that so far. What's kind of interesting about it is that there's deposits that people never could reach before, and one of the things is drilling technology has really matured quite a bit. It's much more sophisticated. Now they can, instead of just going straight down, they can go horizontally and kind of control the direction of where they're drilling. So you can hit deposits that were never hit before. So at this time, when we're looking at fracking or hydraulic fracturing, that's actually increasing the available fuel, petroleum fuel in the United States by 30%. So it's it's enough money, it's enough jobs to solve the debt problem and put us back on track to being a productive nation with jobs and energy.
Wouldn't that make us self-sufficient, Mark?
Yeah, that would solve a lot of national...
Wouldn't that mean we wouldn't be buying oil from Venezuela, from Saudi Arabia, from Iran, through third countries, through Iraq?
It would have huge national security aspects to it because it would, well, not only that, it would just create a lot of jobs.
But who's opposed to fracking?
Well, people are concerned about fracking for several reasons. You know, there's the earthquake. People think there's earthquake problems. And then there's arguments against it as far as pollution for air and water. Now, some of the arguments are that, you know, by fracking, some of that oil or some of the chemicals from the fracking might get into aquifers. But, you know, the areas where they're fracking is quite a bit, thousands of feet lower than your aquifers. They're saying, well, there might be crevasses where it works its way up and gets up to the aquifer. There hasn't been any cases where that's evident or proven, but I guess it could be a possibility, but it hasn't shown up yet. On the other hand, you know, during drilling, when the petroleum gets to the surface and it's being transported, there's always a chance of air pollution or water pollution there from spills on the actual surface facility. But those are the kind of engineering and treatment and control aspects that are with any petroleum facility.
Well, is there anything with the fluids they use? Because I do understand that there's about 3,500 different combinations of fluid they use, depending on the type of shale, the thickness, the density, all of that. Okay, but I understand there are some of the solutions that have been linked to carcinogens. What do you know about that?
Well, they're reasonably tight-lipped on the trademark of the chemicals that are going into the fracking compounds. But, I mean, when you get into that, when you start talking about risk factors, you have to talk about the difference between hazardability and toxicology or toxicity, okay? You can have something that's toxic, right? But if it's completely enclosed and 5,000 feet below the surface, it's not a hazard because no one's getting exposed to it. You could have something that's low toxicity, but it's going right into your lake that you're drinking from. That's highly hazardous. So so there's kind of a balance there that, yeah, there's some toxicity there, but the question is how hazardous is it? Get loose and going to affect water or air and be a deleterious effect.
Have there been any noted cases where any fracking fluid has caused a cancer or a sickness or an outbreak or anything like that that could be documented?
There's been claims of that, and there's been claims that there were settlements and quiet money paid, but there hasn't really been documentation showing that fracking is a problem. Now, there's people argue, well, the drilling and the storage and the transportation of the fuel once it gets to the surface have caused problems, and there are cases of that. But the actual fracking itself, there haven't shown cases that I've seen.
From what I've read, fracking's been around since the 40s, okay? And now we're talking about a science that's had this, 70 years of development. So what happens in a borehole? And we know because we're deep sea drilling and we're offshore drilling and we're drilling in sensitive areas. And it seems pretty rare that anything even happens on the surface. So is the fracking at thousands of feet below aquifers as safe as drilling normally for oil?
Well, I would say that it's probably, in a lot of ways, safer because it's so far removed. But anyway, a lot of this is going to be hashed out in the New York's top court because we have energy companies and landowners in a lawsuit against the town of Dryden. Again, what the town of Dryden did is say, hey, we're going to put a zoning law in that you can't do any fracking in our town. There's 170 other New York communities that also have anti-fracking laws. And so now it's going up to the top court, and this, all these issues will probably be pretty well fleshed out by the top court.
Yeah, but when you're buying land and you have a right to use the minerals on that land, why is it that any city or municipality would ever be able to tell you can't do this unless there's proven science to say it's dangerous? I'm not understanding where the city of Dryden, just because they don't like it, can put a stop to this.
Well, the argument of the energy and the landowners is that there is the oil, gas, and solution mining law, and there's a special department in the state that's supposed to be handling this, and though the locals don't have the expertise or the jurisdiction or authority to be monitoring this. So that's what the energy companies and the landowners are saying. It's like, this is already monitored by the state. We can't have every municipality, doing their own regulation on this.
That's what I'm saying. Isn't the regulation of oil, gas, and any kind of drilling like that, isn't that more of a national issue? Or
well, that's actually the state.
The state issue, okay, but it's not a Mountain View issue. It's
Well,
not a Palo Alto issue.
But Mountain View might try to make its own zoning law. Just like you might say, well, you don't want to have two-story houses, or you got to have a palm tree in your front yard.
Well, is Dryden trying to change the zoning? Is that what they did?
Yeah, it's a zoning law. Yeah,
okay, so they changed it in a zoning law. Did they say that the zoning was only for you couldn't frack, or was it that you couldn't dig?
I think this is particular to fracking.
Well,
I think all these other communities are particular to fracking.
But who's to say you can't dig as deep as you want on your property?
Well, what they're saying is that what they're saying is that because digging's one thing, if you're mining it's another. I think that fracking is definitely going to be something, because you could be bringing in chemicals, which is different than just digging. So you are going to have certain things that would be regulated under the state.
Okay,
is
Dryden
if you're drilling for water, for example, right?
Okay.
You're not going to be using the chemicals and that you would use along with the sand and the high pressure water to loosen up these geological formations. So you do have chemicals. So there is some reason.
So is it the use of chemicals then is what they're basing their zoning on? Is that what they're basing it on?
Well, I think that's one of the big fears. Now there's also other fears that the actual fracking itself, the high pressure, like say if you're digging for a well, you're not really doing the high pressure too. Some people are arguing with the high pressure can cause earthquakes or can cause some kind of geological problems. So those are kind of the arguments against it.
So you're going to move through high pressure with hydraulic drilling. You're actually going to move a tectonic plate?
Well, that's
That's what some people are saying.
Well, there's claims.
This is what I've heard.
I mean, there's claims that there's flames coming out of the faucets, and there's claims that people are getting sick and they're being affected by this. So I think this is now it's up to the highest court in New York. A lot of these issues are going to be a little bit fleshed out, so we can see really what we've got.
I hate to compare it. Is this another global warming issue?
I don't know if it's so much global warming, but it is a huge energy engine. Like I said, fracking gives us 30% more fuel, and so that solves a lot of our fuel problems. It solves exporting fuel from countries to here and going to war to fight for oil. You've got plenty of oil here.
Yeah.
So I mean, it may be a situation like you have cartels in Africa, right? That have diamond mines. They don't want everyone to give. If you gave all the diamonds away at once, they'd only be worth like $1 a piece. So if you want to sell diamonds for $4,000 or $5,000, $10,000 a piece, you want to keep the supply limited. So there may be some people who are in the energy business or
supply and demand,
different things that want to keep the demand.
But
up
isn't this more of an environmental issue? Is it mainly environmentalists that are fighting fracking?
Well, I mean, there are environmental arguments, but I mean, what's the motivation behind them? Maybe it's environmental, maybe it's supply and demand. It could be economic. There's political reasons. There's a lot of reasons people might be on one side or the other. I guess some of the reasons that you'd want to be on the side is because it creates a lot of jobs and has a lot of fuel and probably decrease the price of fuel. But I mean, we've had some people in this administration say we want to keep fuel up at $10 a gallon.
Isn't the state of North Dakota a clear example where fracking is actually good for the economy, good for the state?
Yeah.
I don't really understand. But I do want to. I do believe that what I've read is mostly it's an environmental issue that people are saying because they're more afraid of the fluids that are inside the actual fracking juice or the slurry. And I think we're going to have to come back to that on another night. But I wanted to thank John and May for coming in tonight. And for Mark and myself, I thank you for coming to Law Talk tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Right.